one of the structural problems with Obamacare is that it was dependent on these cost savings reductions in the first place. I don't really care so much about the handout that it was, the quote unquote bailout or handout to health insurance companies. That's a philosophical difference that we could discuss. What I care about is that structurally it required the goodwill of either Congress or the executive branch. And by that, what I mean was they wrote and shout out to my producer, Max, for finding this, because one of the questions that jumped out to me is why in the hell, please somebody tell me, why in the hell is the executive branch issuing payments in the first place? That was my question. Why is it now in the purview of Donald Trump to be able to penalize Americans by cutting off payments from the executive branch? Why isn't this in the budget? Why isn't this a part of the ACA? It's something that needs to be approved and paid for by Congress. And then we're investigating, and my hypothesis was that perhaps they avoided giving it to Congress because they knew that if it was in the hands of Congress, then it would be back and forth every year. Every year there would be speculation as to whether or not these CSR payments were going to go through, right? And so it was going to be volatile based on whoever is in charge of the House, right? Because they have the purse strings. And the reality is that the only option they had, because if you look at 2014, the Congress decided not to authorize payment of the CSR payments. So they ran into exactly that. And what did President Obama do? Well, there is somebody, and I want to know the story. This is going to be a great story for somebody to write, some journalist that actually has the time, because I don't. There is somebody who wrote this language in the Affordable Care Act to authorize the payments of cost savings reductions. And the language is written intentionally vague such that it could either be something as a budget line item for the House or an entitlement. And if it was an entitlement, that was something that the White House, the executive branch, could oversee and institute. And I know I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but the reason I'm getting into the weeds is because I need you to understand the structural problem with Obamacare. The structural problem with Obamacare, it was that these payments that make it possible for health insurance companies to give you low deductibles was dependent on either a benevolent House or a benevolent White House. And what do we have right now? Neither. We have neither a benevolent House of Representatives nor a benevolent White House. And so now we're stuck with a structural problem in Obamacare that will not be fixed until somebody who actually loves Americans get into office again. That is a fundamental flaw of Obamacare that is key to the legislation. And I put it like that because this is what Donald Trump has attacked. And yet it is another opportunity with everything else that Donald Trump has done with Obamacare. It has been yet another opportunity to demonstrate to the American people why we cannot continue with Obamacare. It is better than what we had. It is magnitudes of order better than what Republicans want to give us, which is shit. They don't want to give us nothing. But it is fundamentally flawed in the sense that if you get somebody in the White House like Donald Trump, they can destroy it with the stroke of a pen, one person. And I'm sorry, 1/6 of our economy should not be dependent on the stroke of a pen of one person and depending on whether or not they're kind and they actually care. Neither should it be dependent on the whims of who's in control of the House of Representatives. So this is just one of several structural flaws that, and I'm assuming that there was an assumption, and what this is going to take us right to the Hillary conversation. I'm assuming that there was an assumption that Republicans weren't going to win again in the White House. So if we got a shitty Congress, then at least we'll have remember all those articles why Republicans will never win the White House ever again? I think there was an assumption that the Democrats would at least have the White House if they don't have the House. And that was a bad assumption. And this is where we are. And this is how we are. So now, what is the result? Well, the result is that the U.S. government, by law, is going to have to pay out to cover the increases in the premiums, because people's premiums are going to go up. But the United States government still has to pay out these tax subsidies in order to these rebates to cut down the cost of the premiums. So ultimately, I believe I saw an estimate of $194 billion increase in the deficit, because it's going to be paid by the government anyway. That was almost a master stroke in Obamacare, right? But still, there's still a group of people who are going to be screwed the most. Those are the people who make too much money. Shit. Now I'm thinking about it, I might fall in that category. In between actually having money and not having any money, there's a gaping hole of people who have just enough money to be screwed over by the government. And those are the people who are going to be hurt. Everyone else, they're going to still get their premiums reduced, and the government is going to pick up the tab. Here's the other thing that's going to happen. It's going to destabilize the markets. It's going to destabilize the exchanges, and more than likely, it's going to be the linchpin that pulls apart Obamacare. But you know what else that this is going to do? It is going to expose to all the people involved why we need a simplified program, one that already has been tested, tried, and true, that does not have all the hurdles or all the opportunities for a nefarious government regime like the Trump regime to get in there and to destroy health care for everyone. We need Medicare for all. And I think if we begin to convince the rest of the Democrats and show them how this is exactly why, it's not just a philosophical thing, right? It's a very practical thing, because even if we win in 2018, Donald Trump will still be in the White House, so we can't legislate the CSR payments. Even if we win in 2020, it's a possibility that the House will still be underneath control of the Republicans, so we can make the payments, but that from the executive branch like Obama did. But that doesn't mean that we're going to have a Democratic president in 2024 or 2028. And so we'll always be forever playing this cat and mouse game of, is there somebody in power who wants to take care of Americans? If so, you have insurance. Is there somebody in power who wants to screw Americans? If so, you don't have insurance. And we need to fundamentally show the Democrats on this side of the equation, and some Republicans, maybe, we need to get them on one accord and say, yes, Obamacare was progress, but this right here is exactly one of the #1 reasons why it is not sufficient. Not because we don't like Obama, not because we don't like Nancy Pelosi's work on it, not because of anything else. All these hurt, people are going to have hurt feelings. No, but because it is fundamentally dependent on at least this one core component, a critical component, is fundamentally dependent on the benevolence of our leaders. And we're not always going to have benevolent leaders. We are going to have leaders who are going to strategically try to find a way to destroy every safety net, even if it means, like the Associated Press is saying, that 70% of the people who are going to be hurt are from states that voted for Donald Trump. So even if it means hurting their own constituents, well, they're committed to their worldview of you don't get anything, no matter what you pay in taxes.